Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening. All right, welcome guys to this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. We are super excited about our guest today, but before we introduce him, we're going to introduce ourselves because we just talked about it and I already almost forgot. My name is Randie Lemons. I am fantasy author, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community, and today I'm joined by my amazing co-host Kathy.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Ireland. I, of course, am the co-host here, and I also do audiobook production management. So that's a new and upcoming thing that I have going on. And I pretty much consume all of my books by audio. So kind of an audiobook aficionado, I guess. Connoisseur.
Yeah. All right, guys, before we get to know our awesome guests that we have on the show, we do just a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are interested in joining our Patreon services, you can have your services announced on our show, on our podcasts, and any social medias that we have. So go check that out. It's a great way to support the show and get your services out there in front of people who are in the same realm as you. So go check that out. It's super cool. Also, we have a 24-hour live event happening on January 11th through January 12th. It's going to be awesome. We are showcasing a lot of indie authors, and we have a huge list of awesome narrators who are going to be there too. So we'll be on TikTok live for 24 hours. Send all of the coffee and vibes that you
Yes.
can. All right, guys. We are super excited to introduce our guest today, Stephen Corona. I probably said that wrong, and you probably get onto people all the time for your last name. Will you introduce yourself?
I am Steve Corona. Yeah, no,
Yes, I did
you
it.
nailed it. I tell people it's Corona like the beer.
Ireland like the country.
Yep, I
Exactly.
say lemons like the fruit.
Yeah.
That's
So that's
awesome. Well,
me.
all right. Well, you're just Stephen. That's it. We wrapped it up.
That's
We
it.
did this
That's it.
thing.
I'm Steve. Nice to see you guys. Have a good one.
So you're actually so much more than that.
I am more than just Steve, yeah. So, what would you like to know? You want to hear a little bit about my background as an actor? Okay, so I started as a theater and film and TV actor about 18 years ago. Got my master's degree in theater acting. So I guess you could say I'm a classically trained actor. And yeah, I got on, film and movie sets, and I met some sound people. One of my good buddies, Eddie, he's a sound engineer. And I said, man, I'd like to get into this whole voiceover thing. This was 2006 or seven, something like that. So he hooked me up with my home audio setup, and I started just putting out auditions and doing the recording thing, and for everything, all kinds of different voiceover. And eventually, I came to audiobooks, and I said, okay, nothing else is sticking. I'm putting out all these auditions. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So I put out a sample for an audiobook, and the next day, a producer reached out to me, and they're like, hey, we've got this handful of abridged audiobook titles we think you'd be great for. And I was like, okay, time to learn real fast, baptism by fire. Um, so I recorded like a handful of audiobooks, and fast forward, I'm a dad full time, got two amazing kids. And so I was the full time, at home dad, and a lot of film and TV acting and stuff in between. So I kind of stepped away from audiobooks for a little bit and then came back to it about 2018 or so. And I've been full time at it ever since. So that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and I'm also a dialect coach. I forgot that part. And I've been doing that about as long as I've been acting. So there you
So
go.
you help people learn how to explain that. What is a dialect
Right.
coach?
Okay. So dialect coach, people throw around different terms sort of synonymously. Accent coach, dialect coach. I've even been called a dialogue coach, helping actors with the lines, I guess. So yeah, that's exactly what I do. I help actors. I'll go on, whether it's for like a theater, production locally. I'll help entire casts work on various accents. I'll go on movies. I've worked with some pretty awesome actors. Um, Helen Mirren, Gerard Butler, to name a few. And yeah, I'll work with them individually to make sure that their accent matches what the character should sound like in the role. And most recently, I've been working a lot, almost exclusively, with audiobook narrators because we have to do a lot of different accents in all these books that we do. So yeah, it's really helped me as an actor as well to be a dialect coach, learning these accents to teach other people. has made my own, that much stronger. So
So, acting. I feel like acting is not something that a lot of kids are just like, "I wanna grow up and be an actor." What was it like, were you just kind of the performer as a kid, like the funny jokester or anything? Yeah, I had a feeling my son's the same way.
yeah, I guess being fourth of five kids, yeah, I was sort of the entertainer. I was like, if I want to get attention, I got to make them laugh. I gotta do something to keep their attention. So early on, that was a lesson for me of like, what can I do? I remember actually, I told my son about this the other day. I remember at one point sitting around dinner and I said something funny, and everybody laughed. And then later on, at that same dinner, I said the same thing and I got fewer laughs. And I realized something clicked in my head. I'm like, rules of comedy. Some things are funny once, but not funny later, or they lose effect. And so I remember even as a kid, kind of compiling these mental notes of like, okay, what makes something funny? What makes something entertaining? And so already as a kid, I'm watching shows, I'm mimicking, like Monty Python. We watched a lot of Monty Python, and the Holy Grail and all that. So anyway, so we would watch these shows. I would mimic. I would get laughs. I would get attention, and so I've always kind of been a bit starved for attention. So I knew as a young kid, I was like, maybe I want to be like a stand-up comedian or an actor or something like that. I tried stand-up comedy, by the way, and it's hard. It's like the hardest performance thing I've ever tried. And I have a lot of respect for comedians who do it all the time, because it's not
Had
easy.
a small stint where I was like, "I think I wanna take up some improv classes. I wanna do that," and I don't think I could do it by myself. Like, I feel like I would need a friend there with me to vibe off of.
Yeah, and so I found that out too, actually. So I took some improv classes. I actually formed a handful of comedy improv troops. We actually performed live at a couple venues here locally, and I learned a lot about performance in general and collaboration. And just like you, I'm like, in that kind of scenario, I work better off of someone and not just solo by myself. So audiobooks is different though, and we'll probably get to that. There, I can play the whole world, and who cares? Because there's nobody there judging me live while I'm doing it.
So, Steve, I have a question with the dialects and stuff. Is there one or like a couple that you really love doing? And is it the same as the ones that you love to teach?
Ooh. Well, I think I end up teaching just kind of whatever people have a need for. So it's tends to be kind of like the more common that you'll see in especially in audiobooks these days. So like Irish, British, French, Russian, Scottish, sometimes those types of accents that are fairly common and occur a lot. Um, for myself performing, I have a funny story, and we could probably get to that about Scottish. I I've always enjoyed that one. I love that the culture of the Scottish people and just the sound of it and how it rolls out in my mouth. And I got to work with a pretty awesome Scottish actor, and so his accent sort of rubbed off on me a bit. So that's one of my favorite. I do Irish a lot. I just did a book last year, yeah, 2024, where I had several
Oh, yeah, we
Irish
have to say that now.
I
Last
know
year.
it's 2025. What the heck? So probably Scottish, Irish. I do a lot of English variations. I enjoy doing a French accent, but I don't often find myself with the opportunity to employ it. So I like French. I think it's fun. I think it has a interesting way that it. The way I think about accents sometimes, I'm very visual, and so I think of like French is like a fine wine, sort of rolling around in your mouth, and you are enjoying it, slowly. Uh, and
Have
Scottish,
you ever watched Ratatouille?
yes, I
Where
love that
he's, like,
movie.
eating the foods and he's, like, he can
Yeah.
visualize the foods? That's what that made me
Yes.
think of.
Exactly. That kind of deal. So I think that answers your question. Those are some of my
Yeah.
top favorites.
What can you just like give an example? Like what's the difference in how you teach or whatever the Irish from the Scottish?
Ah, yes. Yeah, okay. Those two tend to give people trouble sometimes. Just like interestingly, like American Southern accents and and British, because they have a lot of similar sounds in the accent, right? So Irish, and Scottish, a lot of those have similar sounds as well. So for me, the big differentiation now, of course, we can really go down a rabbit hole on this, but the biggest thing for me that helps to teach actors is the oral posture or the placement of where that kind of sits, where it resonates in your mouth. So, so, uh, right. Generally speaking, I would say that, like a good maybe southern, like Dublin Irish, would probably sit a bit more frontal, like dental. It's a lot of your sounds are being pushed more forward, right? Versus like a fairly good like Scottish, sort of a general Scottish accent would be pulled back a bit more into the throat, So there's that. There's the placement, but also there's like cadence, rhythm, and there are some differences in the sounds as well. But that's the big thing is like where do I feel it kind of sitting?
That's very cool. Yeah,
Does
for
that help?
sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
A question that's kind of a little bit off topic, not really, but have you read the Mistborn series?
No, but I'm intrigued. Go on.
So the second arc of the Mistborn series, there is a character in there who he is able to like his whole thing is replicating other people's personalities and like becoming
Hmm.
their persona, and he is obsessed with like their voices, and he's like if they lived in the South coal mines, they have a little bit of cadence to it, or and he when he replicates people, he's obsessed with how their voice sounds, and like he can track people down based off of how they sound, and that you kind of remind me of him because he's
Oh,
also
I
really
love it.
funny. His name's Wayne, and he's also hilarious.
I'm writing this down. Mistborn.
So it's gonna be the second. It's not. It's the Mistborn series. I'm having trouble thinking of the actual name of the second arc. But you'll type in Mistborn series and then Wayne, or Wayne. That's it. It's
I love it.
hilarious.
I love it. And those are the types of characters I love playing, like the, tricksters or mimics. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He's a thief. They're a thief, and he's like the way he works around the law and stuff like that and like justifies what he's doing. It's just he's freaking hilarious. The comedic relief in that book is great.
Love it. Okay. I'm checking that one out for sure. Awesome. Thank you.
um I had a question about the speaking and stuff. Does breathing have a lot to do with like, the way that you take in breaths versus the chest versus the stomach?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, yeah, when I'm narrating. I've had to train myself over the years. I used to be, and I still catch myself, every now and then with one of those gaspy breaths when, God bless you, authors, but sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes your sentences can be a wee bit long, right? They can be a little run on. So, I've learned to break that up as kind of comfortably as I can. So if it's a long run on sentence, I'm going, I'm going. Let's find a spot that it makes sense to kind of insert a little comma where there isn't one. Um, so yeah, I've learned to sort of breathe in a way that doesn't get picked up as much on the microphone. Um, but yeah, I before I hit record, that's when I'll take my big breath. Click record, and now I can go ahead and say a long sentence. So there's that. There's starting with the big breath before hitting record. There's sometimes too I'll catch myself if say it's like a big intense scene. There's a lot of action or something, and I'm speaking maybe at a faster pace, definitely with more intensity, and just the breath is going to come naturally, and I don't want those gaspy in the middle of those sentences, chunks of text. So I'll like turn to the side real quick and sort of breathe off the mic a little bit so it's less. Um, let's see what else. And yeah, as far as where am I breathing from, I try to use diaphragmatic breathing and really fill up that diaphragm so that I can go for longer periods of time before needing a breath. um but also just kind of how I shape my mouth, and maybe this is like my dialects training coming back. I'm really sort of nerding out on this, so y'all just go with me on this.
No, I love it.
um, but yeah, learning how to sort of manipulate how I make sound also along with that is what can I do with my vocal instrument to sort of hide the breath a little bit. So sometimes I might be speaking and wherever I'm placing, if it's a character, if it's doing an accent or something, I might have to take a breath in the middle, and I might just sort of protrude my lips a little bit, suck the breath in, sort of a little further back, so it's not right at the front. It's not like a one of those kind of things. It's just like a very very quiet breath. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's kind of the stuff you're looking for, but
Dude, that's
But
awesome. I
I
think that it's interesting stuff, especially for people who don't, me and Kathy, we have moments where we try to do stuff like that for like our advertisements and things like that within the show. We did what was it, like a 10-second clip that took us like 30 minutes to record because we just were busting up. We couldn't get the lines right. It was horrible, but it was fun.
yeah, see, thank you.
You're muted, Kath.
It's things like this that, people get an appreciation for what, what we actors do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What were you
Well,
gonna say,
I
Kathy?
was just gonna say that it was for the narrator spotlight thing, I think, when we were doing those, and oh my god, it was so funny. Like we literally could not stop laughing. It was hilarious.
It happens. Sometimes
The
you get the giggles.
the pressure that you like, okay, us doing this is great, like the conversational thing, but when there's a script and there's like words that you have to say to like get your point across in the most efficient way, there's something about the pressure that just kind of really can get to you.
It can, but I'm kind of like the opposite sort of personality where I've heard the term pressure prompted. So it's like I thrive under pressure. You know what I mean? If I'm coming up against a deadline, I'm like, okay, let's do this. I'm going to buckle down. I'm going to crank out a really good long session and get as much recording in as I can. Or, yeah, if I'm, say it's like a live audition or something like that, I'm like, bring it on. Let's do this. That's like when I come alive. If there's no pressure, then I don't know. Then I feel like I'm not pushed to the same level of expectation or something, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's interesting. I love that idea of like it's almost like your personality gets to have a break and have like a rest whenever you're not on the spotlight. So you do kind of withdraw a little bit, and then your energy is reserved for those moments when you are.
Exactly.
It's just a
Bingo.
theory idea.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on.
How many hours do you try to do you limit yourself to a number of hours in the booth a day,
Mm,
or how do you manage that?
good question. Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. If we were talking earlier about being sick and it's kind of cold season and all that kind of stuff, and so if I'm not feeling well, but I still have to record because like I'm under a deadline, I'll do whatever I feel comfortable doing, and that could range from maybe I get only a half hour recorded that day or an hour or something. Typically on a day when I'm feeling well, and all things are going great, and I don't have other things, filling up my schedule, I try to get anywhere from like 1 to 3 finished hours of audio a day. But what that can look like is,
That's
2 to like 6 hours of recording. It just depends. And like I mentioned before, I'm a dad, so a lot of times my attention is required elsewhere. Maybe I'm taking the kids to school, picking them up, whatever. So I have to kind of fill in the gaps in between as I have time. Right now they're on break, Christmas break, and so that's been interesting and sort of challenging. Thankfully, they've been sleeping in, so I've been getting my recording done in the morning before they
Yeah,
get up.
you'd think that breaks mean, oh, we get to relax. No, for parents, it's like, oh, my schedule is out the window. I'm not
Mhm.
able to put hardly any work time in.
as they get older
Exactly.
though,
So like,
they'll start
yeah,
sleeping in.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like my kids are teenagers, so I'm like, all right, cool. They're passed out till like noon, so we're good.
yeah, yeah. But then you just have, they are also resting their personality for when they get up, and then they have all of the personality.
Oh yeah, you better believe it.
Do you have girls or boys? What do you have?
My daughter is 15. My son is 13.
The emotion ocean is
My son
starting
just
to
turned
churn.
13.
Of
And they're
course.
great. They're great most of the time, but lately they've been kind of getting on each other, and like that for me is like, guys, just like, can you just chill for a minute and like leave each other alone? Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, they're figuring out the role dynamic of like conversation and how does this operate with sister and how far can I push her and how far can I push him, and
Yep.
also yeah, no, oh my goodness. Kids
They
are
are.
crazy interesting to just observe when you detach the emotions a little bit.
Yeah.
Speaking of kids, when you were a kid and you were like testing out this funny side of you, did you find yourself funny?
Sometimes I would crack myself up, and that kind of reminds me a little bit of we were probably getting to this, but Gerard Butler, when I was working with him, he would crack himself up a lot. So, yeah, sometimes I would say things that I thought were hilarious, and people would look at me like, "What?" you know. My siblings would be like, "You thought that was funny?" But again, that was kind of like I said, that early sort of testing, like what lands, what's funny, certain personalities like certain types of jokes. Other people think it's stupid or immature or whatever. So yeah, all the time I was trying things out. I would mimic characters, from shows I'd seen. Sometimes I was good at it. Sometimes people are like, "What is that supposed to be?" So it was so funny. Actually, fast forward a little bit from childhood into like my college years, and I was in an improv troupe. I remember failing really badly in a performance once. Like I can't remember the scene we were doing, and I jumped in and said something. Nobody laughed. It was so awkward, and I was like, and I sensed it and I felt it and I was like, okay, that didn't work. So I immediately did like a 180 and took a different direction. And then there was laughter and people, went with it. And somebody after the show came up and told me this was the greatest backhanded compliment ever. They're like, "You're like the best performer I've ever seen who falls flat on their face and then recovers." I'm like, "Thanks." So I
Right.
I learned that was one of my strengths is like screwing up, but then like not letting it get to me too much and realizing, okay, that didn't work. What else can we do? Figuring out a way.
Yeah, that's I asked that because my son, he's very comedic and he will crack himself up. No one else is laughing and he's just like knee slapping, like this is the
Yes.
best joke ever, and no one else is laughing. And I'm like, dude, you might have something here if you just keep at it. You might eventually figure out your craft and just be able to crack. And also your audience too, right?
Right.
Some of his jokes would probably kill with other kids his age, but us adults were like, cool, yeah, we've
Yeah.
heard that fart joke 15 times today.
Right.
My son always
Exactly.
says, as long as
Exactly.
it makes him laugh, he's fine. He doesn't care.
Yeah. And see, that's what I've realized with my humor is like my husband often describes me as like a 14-year-old boy because I'm just inappropriate. I'm like, and being a female, it catches people off guard. And I'm like, I don't have to, my humor doesn't have to make other people laugh. I just have to make myself laugh. So I
Yeah.
agree with that, Kathy. Like, as long as it's funny to me, I can laugh by myself.
Real quick, that this is funny. So my wife came home one day. I forgot she was having a short day at work. I'm literally like, I'm not even recording. I'm sitting here having a full on conversation with myself. She's standing there. I didn't even know. I'm like, "Oh, how long you been?" She's like, "Is this what you do all day?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is why I'm in audiobooks because I'm always literally talking to myself out loud anyway. I probably look like a crazy person, Like if I'm in public, then I can control myself. I can look normal. I can blend in with the normies. But like at home, I'm talking to myself out loud. I'm answering my own questions. I'm like, "So what would happen?" She's sitting there. She's like, "What the heck?" She didn't even know. I'm like, "I've
How
told
long
you
were you
this.
guys married at that point though?
This was just like a month ago." So like she knows like I'm a weirdo and she knows what she got when she married me, but I don't think she ever witnessed me actually full on conversation with myself. So
It's
yeah,
like telling people you can bench 250 pounds versus someone seeing you bench
yeah,
250 pounds.
exactly. Like, okay, sure, you talk to yourself. I'm like, no, I really do. Like, I am my own company. I'm never alone.
You're like,
Somebody else
I
asked
chose
me,
to be with you because I can
yeah,
entertain this all day long.
right. I had a
Favor
non-actor
myself.
friend ask me, they're like, "So do you have like multiple personality disorder?" I'm like, "Well, no, look, I have multiple personalities, but it's not a disorder. It's how I make my living.
It's
They
not a
come out when I need
disorder.
them. Yeah, yeah. I can control the personalities. All right. Yeah.
That's freaking
That's
hilarious.
funny. So I'm
Uh,
curious about your early inspiration. Um, was largely with Lord of the Rings. So did you guys watch that as a family, that movie? Did you watch it or did you just read it? Like, how did that all integrate? Because I know my son, we have watched that movie, the whole special edition version, so many times.
Hmm.
We know like all the punch, like all the lines.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm er,
I think I have a beat,
older.
by the way.
So a- as my kids remind me. But so what I'm saying is, I grew up before the Peter Jackson movies were made, and so I actually grew up reading the books, and then like we did watch those older animated like from the 70s, I think it was.
are you talking about the Hobbit ones? The ones that have the
Yeah,
creepiest guys I've
yeah,
ever
yeah,
seen? They're so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
creepy.
So I remember watching that as a kid, and even then, I mean, and my kids look at stuff like that, and they're like, "That was good ever." I'm like, at the time, listen, nothing better had been made. So I remember seeing stuff like that and being like, "Whoa!" Like getting sucked into these fantasy worlds, and the five of us siblings, my brother and my three sisters, we would actually sit around. I remember sitting around like in the summer. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was kind of hot sometimes. We're like, "Wow, there's nothing better to do." This was before like streaming services and stuff, and like the internet.
Commercials.
So we'd sit around and we would take turns reading The Lord of the Rings to each other. And I would always be like, ooh, ooh, I'll read, I'll read. But I was, the fourth out of five. And so my older siblings were like, okay, I guess we'll give you a turn. But then they always enjoyed it when I did. And I'm like, see, guys, like I get into the characters. You guys just like read the words off the page. So even then I was like, there's something to this storytelling thing that I really loved.
So even then
Um,
you were doing like
but
different
yeah,
voices and stuff for the different characters.
absolutely.
That's cool.
You better believe it. And this was before like I said, before I'd seen, the Peter Jackson movies. So it's not like I was mimicking those characters. It's just whatever came to my head. And I think maybe, probably because of those animated films, I can't remember anymore, but I think like the dwarves probably had like Scottish accents and the elves were kind of, like high English or something like that. So I was trying to kind of channel that sort of thing. And we were playing Dungeons and Dragons and all this kind of stuff. So I had this massive influence on my imagination that I tapped into. So yeah.
You just said the thing I was about to ask. The
D&D.
Dungeons and I was looking through your stuff and like, did he mention Dungeons and
Yes,
Dragons in here? I don't think he did.
indeed, absolutely. So what
That's
would you like to know?
well, did you okay, obviously you have the voice to DM, but oh my God, if you were just a character for like I feel like you would probably be one of my favorite characters. I love the people who get comfortable enough to just voice their characters, right? Instead of like, well, my character would do that. No, do your character. What would they say? Please tell
Yeah,
me.
embody your character. And so my cousin, this was like in high school. My cousin was always the DM, the dungeon master, and so he was running the campaigns, and so it was just a group of our friends, and he told me, and I could tell because while we're playing, my friends are always like, yeah, we love his characters, but he told me afterwards, he's like, the rest of them like role play, like they shoot the dice, they ROLL play, they roll the dice, they kind of play by the rules, and they try to get into their characters. But he's like, you role play, ROLE, like you get into it. I'm like, yeah, and I don't always know all the rules. I have to sometimes look stuff up and whatever. But like my super nerdy friends, God bless them, like they had like the rule book memorized. They're like, I don't need a rule book because on page 56, whatever. It's like it says that
Addendum
my
5.
character, yeah, I'm allowed to do this because. But I would just have fun with it and play the characters. So I always tried to play different characters every time we would meet. Like I'd be a wizard this time and be like all stoic and whatever, and then one time I'd be like a gnarly like druid or something that lived in the woods and brewed his own meat or whatever. And um, it was fun for me to try to inhabit all these different characters and different types of not only like the classes and the races and all that kind of stuff. It was fun for me to imagine that, and that definitely helped me in my acting work later, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Finding finding the passion of the joy, like the play in it, right? Like I
Yeah,
feel like D&D is just it's the best representation of like when we were all kids and playing with stuff and pretending and we could do that as an adult without looking too crazy. But I mean,
yeah.
obviously anyone from the outside thinks we're crazy anyway, so we just kind of lean into it.
I've just given up caring. People think I'm
Right.
crazy. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see or to hear if your kids have also gone down that path of kind of like the nerdy and into the fantasy. Are they into all that?
Oh, yeah. Kind of in their own different ways. My daughter is a big bookworm. She's like my wife. Like they just devour books. And my daughter, I keep trying to convert her. She would rather read a book, which is great. Nothing against reading printed books. She doesn't want to listen to audiobooks. I'm like, but honey, like first of all, it's what I do, so like insult. But also I'm like, but there are some really good narrators out there, and maybe she would like a full production multicast with sound effects and stuff. Maybe that would be more engaging for her, but she just doesn't want to get into them. So that's fine. But she's mostly into like murder mysteries, and she's getting into like rom-com and stuff like that. My son is very he reminds me of a younger me. He's more into like the Dungeons and Dragons type of stuff, but he loves like those Wimpy Kid, Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, um, stuff that makes him laugh, or yeah, stuff that's more like full of action and all that kind of stuff. And I kept my Magic the Gathering cards. It's kind of like for those who don't know, for the uninitiated, it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons in playing card format. And so that's been around since like the early 90s. And I kept my collection. I actually added on throughout the years as well. Cause I always thought, I'm like, okay, one day I'm going to have kids and they're going to play with me and it's going to be awesome. And so just a
Wish I
couple
had that
years ago,
foresight.
I was hopeful. I was optimistic. My wife tells me sometimes I'm too optimistic, but anyway. So I kept my cards, and just a couple years ago, I busted them out. I'm like, "Hey guys, let me introduce you to this game. I think you like it." And they do. They're not nearly into it as much as I was, but every now and then they're like, "Hey, Dad, you want to play Magic?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Let's do
Yes.
this. Let's build some decks. Let's throw down." Yeah. So
We
they
were
do take me
similar
back.
like that with our kids with Pokemon and Pokemon Go. Like, we still play
Yeah.
Pokemon Go as a family and the Pokemon cards and everything, and yeah, it's great.
And that's actually a really important point. I think just because I'm an actor and it's what I do professionally, um, I think I'm more exposed, and it reminds me that how important play is. Like you said, even as an adult, we get so stuck in being, in hashtag adulting and like taking care of all these important grown up matters. And obviously, you have to, like, you got to put food on the table, you got to pay the rent, all that kind of stuff. But if you get too serious for too long, like, you forget a lot of the joy in life. And I think that's really sad. We have to play every now and then, in whatever way that looks like
You
for
really
you.
do.
That's
I
very
love
important.
that message to people because I think that especially in America in our day and age, we work so much. We spend more time at work than we do with our families, usually,
Hmm.
especially if you have like an office job or whatever. Um, so I think that I love that message to have fun. Like it's important to have fun.
Yeah, play more. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also, like you said, however that looks for you, that might not look like D&D. That might look like, Netflixing, binging that, and then talking to your girlfriends about it for
Yeah,
hours or whatever.
right. Yeah, I'm getting a book club, or whatever. There's so many ways. Excuse me. So many ways to have fun. So many ways to just play and allow your imagination to wander a little bit.
I think that's interesting, because I feel like maybe with the overworking, like our creativity as a whole, as a people, has really been mm, kind of stifled. You know what I'm saying? Like I just
Mhm.
recently started going to painting with a twist. Have you ever done that? It's
Ooh, I think I know what you're talking about. It
it's
sounds
so
like
much
fun.
fun. Like you can take wine or beer, what you can take alcohol with you and paint and stuff. And
What's not
what
to
is not to
love?
love? And it's so much fun. Like I've gone several times and I absolutely have had so much fun doing it. And it's kind of interesting to see like where my creativity has kind of been unbottled in some areas. So it's pretty fun to do that.
Do you do like the paint by number
No,
ones, or just
it's a
like a
blank
blank canvas
canvas.
and you just
Yeah,
okay? Which is great. But I love, though, like, I've seen some that are paint by number. So I think people that are like kind of artistically hesitant, or like, oh, I'm not creative. That drives me crazy when people say that. I'm like, all people have at least some ability to be
100%.
creative. You just haven't maybe uncovered it yet. So people like my sister that are very mathematically minded, very like analytical, they think they're not creative, but then they try like a paint by number and they're like, "Oh, this is fun. I can apply the colors and follow the
Right.
rules, but still at the end of it have like a beautiful
Right.
work of art."
Yeah.
I love that.
It's interesting because like I mean they have an instructor and you have like one picture that pretty much everybody's doing. And so they show you this is how you do it. So they do it with you,
Mhm.
but it's still at the end of the night, you have, 8 or 10, however many people are in the class, completely different flowers or whatever it is that you're doing. Like it's completely different.
Yeah,
It's
love
fascinating
that.
to see. And it's really good for the soul and the mind to just, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, even like people who, who do kind of put their creativity into their work, like their jobs, like even if you're working at a corporate place, I imagine there's things that you do for your company that is your idea of creativity. And like you said, they think they're not creative. But guess what? You just made your company like $100,000 or whatever. That's
Mhm.
pretty fucking creative if you ask me.
Right? I wish I could be more financially creative, you know?
Me
I might
too.
be artistically, yeah, like I can act, okay, great, but, you know, my friend is building
And I
businesses, you
think
know?
that's the just being given permission to, we word it in the business world, think outside the box. It's color outside the lines, or, you know, you don't have to use red.
Market outside of the
Yeah,
market.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely.
I have a question for you. Did you have, when you were going through and kind of getting into this this whole, I have this passion, I have this idea of what I want to do with my life, did you have like a muse or like a role model or inspiration, like, was oh wow, I just, Mrs. Doubtfire, why am I forgetting his
Robin
Yes,
name?
Robin
Williams.
Williams.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, we
absolutely.
just watched that with my kids the other day, so
Huge inspiration. I wanted to be him, you know? I was like, he is just ridiculously talented, creative, doesn't give any care
You can
about what
say it. He
anyone
gives
thinks
zero
about him.
fucks completely.
He gives
yeah, yeah.
zero fucks, absolutely zero.
For real on this.
No shits are given. Yeah. So I was like, wow, how do I emulate him, you know? And so part of it was, yeah, it was me analyzing. It's really weird. Like I have a strange brain. Like it's part creative but part analytical. And
My
so
favorite people are the weirdos. I think the weirder you are, well, I mean, I think if you have a good streak of
get the
weird,
right weird. Yeah.
yeah.
But so I would like analyze. I'm like, what makes him so interesting, so unique, so funny, so fun to watch? So I would break it down. I'm like, okay, what does he do? First of all, he's hilarious. He's really good at improvising. So I'm like, take some improv classes, you know. What else? Like I said, he just doesn't care. He goes for it. He commits to it. He trusts himself. So those are things that I've learned over time to do. And yeah, a lot of it's due to him being my inspiration for sure.
What, is there anyone else, or did I just somehow pull that out of the hat and pick
He
your inspiration?
he was my inspiration. Like he was probably my main inspiration. I mean, you know, of course, there's a handful. There's definitely like a list of actors or other creative type people that have inspired me over the years. But Robin Williams was probably number one for me all through my childhood and
Well,
growing
and
up.
if
Yeah.
you are close in age to me, I mean, we started seeing Robin Williams with Mork and Mindy, and playing the alien and doing the nano or whatever it was that he did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So there was a
Yeah.
lot of content from him, I guess, from way back.
Right. Oh, and another lesson I learned from him that was very valuable as once I started becoming a professional actor was that not everything he was in was solid gold. Like, you know, even the best of the best in this industry have flops, you know, and it's okay because if you have the talent and you are relentless, you're eventually going to make something good again. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. I hate the word fail because the only way you really fail is if you just give up, you know, because you can have setbacks. You can what is that saying? You never really you can either what is it? Succeed or learn, right? You
Yep.
only fail
Yep.
if you choose to give up or something like that.
Yep.
Um,
Failures are lessons.
yeah. So I'm like, oh, that's a great lesson. Like I said earlier with the improv show, the lady told me she's like, you're great at falling on your face and getting back up again. So I'm like, okay,
Thank you, I
yeah.
think.
But the important part of that is not just keeping on doing the same thing, but learning from your mistakes and hopefully not repeating them or growing in some way, you know.
I have a question, and this is a little personal, and you can totally reject answering this. But with
Okay.
Robin Williams, and like, he was so funny and he put on such a big show, but in the end, he was so fucking depressed. Do you feel like, there is this need to, for a lot of people, make people funny because there's a lot of shit going on inside you?
Oh, honestly, I feel fairly blessed in that I haven't battled with a lot of, depression or demons or anything like that too much in my own life, but I've seen enough of it in other people's lives, both that I know personally, that I love and care about very much, and just like you said, kind of the world in general. So it's always sort of been my mission in life. I'm like, listen, I was given the specific skill set I was given and the talents I have to entertain, to bring some kind of light and joy into the world, and in this darkness that we live in, like, that's kind of an important thing. And so for when people are like, oh, we don't need the arts, or let's not fund the arts, or let's, other things are more important, I'm like, well, yeah, it's important to eat, it's important to have the economy going strong and all that, but part of that, like we talked about, is like, we need an escape from a lot of the serious adult stuff that we go through. And who's going to provide that? The artists, the actors, the performers, so it's like that's my sort of mission in life that I feel like I've been charged with, is I have to use what I have, to entertain. I think it's very important. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I
I
think
did, yeah.
it's so pivotal once you find your calling or what your purpose and what you're meant to do and to, you know, give to the world or whatever. It's almost like this incessant need to do that because it's like this well kind of inside you. That's how I've been
Mm-hmm.
feeling lately, is just like I've found what I'm supposed to do. And now until I get to where doing it, like, you know, regularly, it's like, okay, it's constantly on my mind, like always, constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's nice to get paid for the work that you
Yeah,
do.
that's
And
great.
by the little side note, little tangent here, little sidebar. Um, in what other industry is it okay to not pay people or to underpay people and like expect that, oh, this doctor's going to do the surgery for me for free, right? Or like I can get a discount, right? Just venting a little bit, you know what I mean? As creatives, right? We've all experienced people expecting us to just deliver the work and not be paid or be underpaid. Anyway, that said, yes, it's nice to get paid, and I'm very fortunate. Maybe we could talk about this in a minute, but I just recently won an award for my work,
Well, we're
which
going
is
to talk
really
about it right now.
cool.
What was it?
Yeah, what
100%.
did
No
you
fucking
get?
way. Tell us
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
now.
ignore that script. If you've
No, we
noticed, we
don't.
have not been following it.
But let me
It's
let
to
me
make us
let me
look
just
good.
finish this thought. So it's cool. It's great to get those accolades, right? But that's, like you said, not at all why I do it. Like, I want to win awards. Like, it feels good, and it's like, oh, cool. Now I can say I'm an award-winning, narrator. But more than that, it's the love of the work. Like I told someone the other day, I'm like, I feel like my whole adult life has been leading up to what I'm doing now. Everything I've done, every job, not just the acting stuff, like
In the
sales
play,
and
too. Your
yeah,
play has led you to this.
yeah, exactly. And now I get to put it all together in building this world and telling this story and sharing, collaborating with the author who's already put the words on the page for me. And now I have to bring it to life with my voice. I'm like, this is fantastic. I get to do this for my job. This is fantastic. So, absolutely, 1,000%. I'm with you.
I want to know the award.
But
All
you
right.
want to talk?
Now, yeah, now we need to
Okay,
know.
so
That was
let's talk
great.
about
We
the
love
award.
that. That was
Yeah.
so inspirational.
Thanks for
Now
that.
let's
But
hype you
what's
up.
the award?
Well, so
We're so Americans.
I know we
Now
are.
let's do your
Right.
achievements.
Yeah, exactly. So earlier, okay, last year I have to keep remembering it was in 2024 and we're in 2025 now. So last year, an author who I actually went to college with, she started writing books, and just kind of over the years, we would check in on each other, like, oh, hey, congratulations, I saw that you published this book, or she'd be like, oh, congratulations, I saw you narrated. And so it finally came to a head where she was ready to put her books into audiobooks. And she approached, I don't know if I'm allowed to say certain
Yeah.
company names, but no. Okay,
No.
Kathy says no, no. I think
No,
it's
she
more
was
of a no.
yeah,
I don't
you're
care.
good.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
Name
name
drop it.
drop
We do it
anything
all the
you
time.
want to.
so one audiobooks. She was going through them, and she said, "Well, I have this narrator in mind. Actually, I went to college with him, and I've seen his work, and he's really good, and I think he'd be good, at least for some of my books." So out of the blue, I'd never even heard of One Audiobooks before this, and they reached out. They put me on their roster for future work, and um, they're like, "Hey, Rachel Covacini wants you to do a couple of her books." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So it's really fun. She made this series of books called Once Upon a Western, and so she took like classic fairy tales and put them into Western stories.
That's so cool.
I'm like, I love this concept. So the one of them that I did is called One Bad Apple, and it's basically the Snow White story set into a Western. And I'll give away a little bit, but I don't want to spoil the whole thing. So
Yeah, what's the blurb?
the
I'm
seven
just kidding.
dwarves are these seven little white kids who their parents had died. You know, it's the 1800s, cholera, whatever, diphtheria. I don't know, Oregon Trail. What else are people dropping over from? You know, so these kids are on their own, but they still have an uncle, so they're going to be heading west, and they're going to be on their own. The oldest one is like 15. I don't know. So they're kind of helpless, but they're going to be heading west, and this wagon train of black folks comes through, and they'd never interacted. This is 1800s, you know, middle of America, like Illinois or something, and they're like, oh, who are these people? And they're just curious more than anything. And I just love how she tells the story of both, you know, groups of people meeting each other and interacting, and certain members are sort of distrustful of each other, or instantly are just accepting and loving. And so I love that kind of you know, dynamic of breaking stereotypes and showing that it's like each individual person has within them certain, you know, capacity for love or anything like that. So anyway, that's all I'm giving you. You have to go listen to the story for the rest
Okay,
of it.
I need you to repeat it again.
Okay, it's
What's the name of
called
it?
One Bad Apple by Rachel Covasini. And so she was listening to what I submitted, the audio, and she said within 2 minutes, I think it was, she was in tears. She's like, Steve, oh my God. She's like, like, I knew that you would do good work, but like, this is exceptional. And she's like, I really want to submit this for an award. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do this. So we started talking about the various, you know, audiobook awards out there. And she submitted me for the SOVAS, the Society of Voice Acting and Sciences, which is like everything voiceover, right? Like animation, commercials, everything, audiobooks. And so I won for outstanding performance in, well, what was the category? Religious or metaphysical, something like that. Because there's a preacher in the story, and so there is some religion woven into
Amazing.
it. Uh,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and also you went up against all aspects of narration. Like that's freaking impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's just separate categories for each genre and everything, but still, yeah, there was, and my category, there were some heavy hitters, you know, other narrators that I know personally that have done more work than me. One of the narrators had two books in that same category. I was like, oh man, she's got, you know, two shots at it. There's no way. And then when I actually didn't go to the ceremony, but a friend of mine was there, and I was texting him. I'm like, "Hey, have any of our friends won?" I was just excited for my friends. He's listing them off, like, "Yeah, this person," and he's like, "Oh, and you," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Just now, they just announced, just right now as we're texting." I'm like,
That's
"That's awesome."
amazing.
So that's how I found
Yay.
out. Yeah,
That's so congratulations. That is a
Absolutely.
huge, I think,
thank you.
accolade to just add to like, hey, this is validating that I'm good at what I do.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It helps remind me that I'm doing the right thing. You know.
So, leaning into that, so is there a genre or trope or whatever that you kind of
Mm.
lean towards or gravitate towards? Is there one that you just are like, fuck that, I'm not doing that? Like, I want to know.
Great question. Great question. Exactly. I think all narrators would probably answer, "I'll do whatever work is given to me." You know, so there's some of that because we just enjoy the work so much, and it's like, yeah, give me a story and I'll tell it for you. Um, I would say the work that I enjoy the most isn't necessarily genre specific, but just like, is it a well told story? Is it captivating just reading it off the page? Are the characters really interesting? Can I really sink my acting teeth into them and, you know, do a lot of fun things with them? So, so to me, genre isn't as important. But that said, I have definitely found myself being cast more in like fantasy, lit RPG, thrillers. I would love to do more like mystery, you know, murder mystery, things like that. I think are really interesting and fun. Detective stories like Sherlock Holmes and more modern stuff as well. So I'd love to. I'm putting that out there to the universe. Hey,
Manifest
universe,
that shit right there, Steve.
thrillers. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hey, authors who
Right.
listen to this podcast.
Thriller.
Right, right.
What do we do? Thriller, mystery.
But fantasy, lit RPG, I'm really enjoying those because those really give me an opportunity to dive into my acting toolbox and pull out all those character things that I get to do, different voices, genders, accents, all that is really fun for me. So
Do you enjoy like the villainous characters or like, getting really kind of into the emotional voice? Because that's like, I feel like a lot of the emotions from villainous characters is their voice, like, right? They don't typically show a wide range of emotions except for how they talk.
right, right. A lot of times with villains, it's maybe like a thinly veiled disdain, or a lot of times you get like the anger, the rage that's all pent up that comes exploding out. I did a longer book, a 24-hour audiobook last year. It was a fantasy book. It's called the Red Winter, and it's the final book in the Tapestry series by Henry H. Neff. And it was really interesting how that came about. If I can real quick back up on that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
so I was given the audition, and I read for it, and I was chosen out of, I don't know, I think he said he listened to like 50 auditions and he loved mine. Um, it was really cool because the audition, there was like a couple of scenes where there was like 10 characters talking back and forth to each other, and they all were given very specific, accent and character type notes. I'm like, okay, cool, this is gonna be fun. So for me, I dove into it, and he loved it, and I couldn't record it right away. They wanted it done like the next month. I was like, oh man, I'm booked out for a few. Is it possible to push it back like 3 months? And he said, you know what? I will wait because I want it done well rather than fast. I'm like, okay, great. And even then, I still had to push my deadline back a little bit, but I got it done.
Yeah, 24 hours of completed work. Heck yeah, that's
It's
a
a
lot.
long time. And there was 93 speaking characters in the book, and using 28
Wow.
accents.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the name of that
But
again?
one of them was so it's called The Red
Red
Winter.
Winter, y'all. For you
The Red Winter. Check
fantasy
it
only
out.
people.
Yes. I loved it. And again, I'm not just trying to be like, hey, get all my books. But that one I think
That
was really well
actually, you
written,
can
a lot
totally
of
do
fun.
that.
I know, I know. But I like to tell people go listen to a book, not just because I did it, but because it's a good book to listen to. And so that was so much fun. And going back to your question now, finally, roundabout way,
I
the
already forgot my
villains.
question because you
The
started talking about an awesome
villains,
book.
yes. So there's a couple of villains in that book that I loved their voices, and that okay, here's a note for the authors. Please follow this piece of advice. This author gave me very detailed character breakdown notes of like, first of all, I'm coming in doing the final book of the series, right? Because his previous author was not available anymore. And so he did the first 4 books. And this was, a 700-page book. And anyway, a lot of characters that I didn't know. I had to get myself introduced to them. So it really helped to have those character notes. Anyway, and the way he described these villains, I was like, ooh, this is going to be fun. And of course, I sent some samples to make sure he was like, yeah, that's where I want to go with this. But one of them was like that deep kind of growly. He was a demon. But there was another one that was sort of menacingly, um, you know, like almost like monotone, and that can be creepy in its own way too, right? Like not with that deep, booming, growly voice, but sort of keeping it almost emotionless. And you're like, what's happening? This person's gonna at any moment, kill me. So yes, to the villains, they're a lot of fun to play. That's my long answer.
Do okay, well that see, this is why we ignore the script sometimes because I've looked at it like once. Does having an emotional connection, like you just said, to the characters help you push the acting and push the when you're delivering their lines further where you're like, I know why this guy's doing what he's doing, so let's actually put some raw emotion into it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question, and it reminds me of something that Anthony Hopkins said once in an interview. They were asking him about playing Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, right? And they're like, "How do you play that creepy character so well?" Like, we're a little, concerned. Like, do we need to get you checked out? Psych evaluation. Um, and he said, "It's easy enough to play villains. if you understand where they're coming from, you don't have to agree with them as a person. But as the actor, you have to at least understand why they would do what they do. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant, you know? So yeah, as the villain, I understand, okay, well, they believe that they are doing what's best for them and maybe even the greater good, what they think is the greater good. Of course, the hero thinks otherwise. You know, they often have an opposite opinion, which is more centered in, you know, typical morals and all of that. But the villain, yeah, they believe that they don't think they're the villain, you know? They think that they're just operating in a way that benefits them and maybe some other people. So that definitely helps to kind of approach it that way. It's like, I can understand why. I don't agree, but I'm setting aside my personal biases to become that character for a moment and understand where they're coming from. Yeah, totally.
I think backstory for for especially for villainous characters is so important, because when you have that line where you're like, my emotions are getting pulled to empathy for this bad guy,
Yeah,
what the fuck? Like,
yeah,
that is fun. That is a fun feeling for me of like, oh, I also have to test my morals here because I'm feeling sad that this guy's plan is not going the way he
right.
wants it to.
Yeah, it's like the whole anti-hero thing, right? Like uh Breaking Bad, you know, is a classic example. Walter White, you know, I mean, the guy's a bad guy fundamentally, like he's committing crimes at a very high level, but yet you can't help but root for him a little bit. I mean, towards the end maybe a little bit you lose that and like, okay, like dude, you need to, you know, get what's coming to you. But at least for a while in between in the middle of the story, you're like, if I was in the same situation, I might do the same, you know, or I might be tempted at least, right? So yeah, I mean, an actor like Bryan Cranston, of course, uh, can bring an anti-hero like that to that point, like you're talking about, of the audience kind of rooting for them at least a little bit, or like secretly, ooh, I know I shouldn't, but I kind of hope that they can pull one over on the, you know, on the authorities or whatever, right?
We just got done reading One Dark Window, and the monster in the story is our favorite character, or my favorite character
Yeah,
in that series.
absolutely.
uh, yeah.
I
And
love it.
I don't know, do you watch anime at all?
No, I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well, Naruto, that's another good one that has I told my husband, I was like, I don't think there's any bad characters in the story by the time you get to the end of it, because they all have such good reasons for doing what they're doing. Most of them. There is a couple of bad ones, but
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you
All right. Well,
something though, about the um the prep and the, you know, the character guides and the pronunciation guides and stuff. Do you not get that? Because I'm hearing that a lot from narrators. And
mhm.
as I've been doing the production management for an audiobook um for J.R. Thorne, and like I did the entire thing. Like I prepped a manuscript, I did the pronunciation guide, the character guide, like I recorded it so that you wouldn't have any, you know, the narrators wouldn't have any questions as to how things are pronounced. Like, is that not normal?
Good on you, and I wish that that happened more often. No, so technically, most people would probably tell you that all of that responsibility kind of falls on the shoulders of the narrator, and it makes sense to a degree, right? Because if we're prepping the book and we're becoming familiar with it and learning the characters and all of that, then in theory, we should do a better job when we actually narrate it, when we record it, right? But yeah, I mean, I'll take all the help I can get. If someone's gonna, you know, send me, like I mentioned this longer novel I did last year, um, you know, the author sent me like a 30-page reader guide. It was broken out. He's like, here's everything you need to know about the entire series leading up to this point. Here's all the different characters and relationships and, you know, important events and names of characters and places, and all of that was super helpful to know ahead of time, and pronunciations, you know. So I welcome that, absolutely. If you want to do that, you know, for me, if we're working on a book, I will take it. And especially too, you know, I think the more that we work as narrators, the deeper into this journey that we get, you know, the more our schedules fill up, and so it becomes harder and harder to do all of that work without kind of cutting into another project that we might have scheduled down the road.
Right.
So I will always say, yeah, go for it, help me out. But otherwise, I'm no stranger to it, and I can do it. But I'll take the help.
Yeah.
For sure.
Essentially, we need more of you, Kathy.
I'm available to help with audiobooks. I'm actually pretty good.
Awesome. We should talk later.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, yeah, she's like her connections with audiobook people are crazy. That's why she was like so excited to get on this episode with you because like her audiobook stuff, that's her thing. So
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to be here.
um I have a question, and this is just kind of like I mean, I thought of it earlier. In your mind, like all of us have a voice in our mind. With the plethora of voices that you have, do you have do you just have your normal voice that you think with, or do you have like accents
Oh
that
my
you think
gosh,
with?
That I think
that's
with.
such a great question. We want to know how
That
crazy
is
you really are.
fantastic. Wow.
Right.
Do you now? Um, that's interesting. I don't know that I've ever really consciously thought in another character. Well, I mean, when I'm talking out loud to myself, I have those conversations. I'm jumping in and out of accents all day long. Well, Steve, should we respond to this email first, or should we? I do have that. I do have that Zoom call coming up later. Yes, should make sure that I'm not late for that. I mean, like out loud all the time. I'm in different characters, but in my head, I, I think I probably just talk to myself in my head with my own voice. But who can tell?
Do
I don't know.
you?
Good.
Yeah,
That's gonna
no,
be something you're
he's
conscious of
gonna think
now.
I
about
know
that
I'm gonna
like
be like,
from
oh,
now
oh,
on.
oh.
That's hilarious. Um,
Thanks for putting that in
when you
my
get
head.
pissed off or something, like when you're angry and you're like ranting,
Huh?
what character, what accent do you slide into for that?
You mean like in real life? I'm
Sure,
angry
or
at something.
just whatever.
Ooh, I think German. I think I often, yeah, like oh scheiße. Like I kind of go like maybe Austrian, like Schwarzenegger or something like I will kill you all. Um, I don't know. I think that was the first thing that came to my head. Because I do. I'm like oh scheiße. So yeah, there you go. German,
That's
Austrian.
funny.
Do you
Yeah,
have road
for some
rage?
reason.
Okay.
No, I used to. I used to. Bad. I used to. Yeah, Um, I used to, like in my 20s, but over time, like honestly, I think my whole life philosophy has changed to like, you know what, like we're all just trying to get along and survive, and so I hope that everyone does, and so honestly, okay. I'm a bit of a religious man myself. And so like I've actually started praying for people. Like people would like zip in front of me and like they're driving erratically. And it used to be like, yeah, you son of a. But now it's more like, ooh, Lord, please help them get where they're going safely, not kill anyone along the way. You know what I mean? So like, I'll
Aw.
say a prayer out loud for people. I'm like, they need help. Help them. I don't want to see them down the road in a
You
wreck or
just slid
something. You know
into
what I
a
mean? So
Southern Baptist.
did I? I'm like, oh Lord, bless that person because they need all the help
He
they can
turns
get.
into his Southern black lady voice for that, and that's
Lord
great.
have mercy.
I'm telling it like it is, y'all.
Oh man, that's so funny.
Ah,
Yeah, you do give me Robert Williams, geez, Robert William vibes big time.
He was my
Okay,
hero.
now we have to talk about this because I know the listeners have heard you name drop him multiple times now, and they're like, okay, I just need to know, is Gerald Butler as amazing as he is in videos or movies?
Oh, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. I was told when I showed up on set the first time when I was coaching him, the first AD's like, you can call him Jerry. He prefers, that the people around him call him Jerry. I'm like, okay, Jerry. So yes, is he as amazing? And yeah, he's hilarious. He's so full of life and energy. And I think we mentioned this earlier. Like he was constantly cracking jokes that he found funny, and sometimes we did.
I
He would
love
literally like you always hear rolling on the floor laughing, right? ROTFLOL or whatever, right? He literally was rolling on the floor making himself laugh, and we were like, that
what is
okay.
happening.
That was an interesting Scottish joke. Like I'm sure that Scottish people think that's funny, but like us American crew were like, like laughing all, uncomfortably. Sometimes though, like he did straight up, crack me up, and I'd be laughing too. But a lot of times it was that. It was like, oh, okay, interesting. um, but yeah, like the first time I met him, his pants were off. So there's that. Uh, true
That's a
story.
good way to meet him,
Yeah.
I'd say.
So let me clarify. Let me clarify because I feel like I just got myself in some hot water there. Uh, so I show up on set, right? This was halfway through the movie. He had actually let his previous dialect coach go because he didn't get along with, they're kind of button heads, right? But he needed a dialect coach because he's very much Scottish and his character needs to be American, right? So they hired me as a local guy. They're like, oh, scrambling last minute. We heard you're a dialect coach. Can you come on and help us out? So I come on. It's late at night. It's a night shoot. The AD walks me over to his trailer, and she's like, "Well, he's like in the middle of changing or whatever for the next setup, but he said you can come on in." Okay, we knock on the door. All right, come on in. Open the door. There he is. He's in his skivvies. He's just walking around his trailer, pantsless. All right, hey, come on in. You're the new dialect coach. All right, let's go. Come here. Let's come sit down. Let's have a conversation. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I come sit down, I'm introducing myself, and like halfway through, he cuts me off, and he's like, "Oh, I got to show you this. This is so hilarious." I'm like, "Okay." He's got this big screen TV on the wall, and he's showing me the dailies, so like the stuff they shot, the day before, and it's this like match cut where there's a lady walking across the street like pushing a stroller, and this is a movie. It's called Gamer, by the way. It's like set in this weird kind of futuristic video game type of world. Anyway, lady's walking across the street with a stroller. Okay, no big deal. She walks across the street. I'm like, what's funny about that? Next shot, it's that same location. It's a crosswalk. You see an ice cream truck drive by. I'm like, okay, I still don't get it. Now you put the match cut together. The lady's walking across the street pushing a ice cream truck takes her out. He's laughing. He's like, isn't that great? I'm like, yeah, that's funny, man. Okay, so I'm like, okay, introduction to his sense of humor. Got it. But it was so funny though, and he would constantly just be random stuff like that. Anyway, and so he's like, all right, so how do we do this? And I'm like, how about I read the line out loud and you repeat after me? Great, I love it. I'm a mimic. Okay, I guessed correctly. And so I would say his line, he'd repeat after me. I'd be like, ooh, okay, let's tweak it a little bit. Right there, your R sounded a little Scottish. Let's do this to make it sound more American. Oh, okay, cool. He would repeat after me till he nailed it. And so we'd go on set, and I would say the line, he'd repeat. He turns around, literally, he tells the director, all right, let's go. Boom, action, we're rolling. I'm like, oh, okay. A little startling, I'm like, I better make sure I'm off camera, like he was like right next to me. I'm like, oh, they're shooting. So it was like that kind of fast pace.
The
It was
chaos
it was fun, but like I said before, I thrive under pressure. So I'm
under
like, okay,
pressure.
let's do this.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, couple weeks into the shoot, his mom is gonna come visit. Is wee little short, she's like a 4 foot tall Scottish lady, I'm like, how? I don't understand that, he's enormous. Anyway, um, but he's like, Steve, all right, my mom's coming to visit today. He's like, you gotta fuck with her. I'm like, what? He's like, no, do your Scottish accent. She's gonna love it. I'm like, okay, if you say. I'm like, he's my boss. I better do what he says, right? His mom comes on set, oh, mom, I gotta introduce you. This is my mate Steve. He's like, go for it, Steve. I'm like, hi, Mrs. Butler. It's great to meet you. She immediately, because it's like you're in a different country, but someone sounds like you, right? You latch on. She's like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, Scotland. She's like, what part? And I'm thinking, she's on to me. She knows I'm faking it, but I'm like, the North? I didn't know my geography, my Scottish geography to save my life. She's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, okay, she's like, you're from Aberdeen, aren't you? I know that accent. And I'm like, oh, she thinks I'm from Scotland, but just from a different part. So she thinks that we're screwing with her, that I'm just from a different part of the country, but I'm actually from a totally different country. We get into the conversation. I can't keep up. She's mentioning all these Scottish things, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm a good mimic. I sound like Gerard. He's behind her. He's on the floor, rolling around, holding his guts, laughing. And she's like, what are you laughing at? And finally he's like, oh, mom, he's trying to tell her. And I'm like, I got it. The jig is up, lady. I'm from Wisconsin. She's like, oh, and she smacks me and she's like, oh, you broke my heart. I thought you were really Scottish. So
Wisconsin.
that
I
was
like
fun. I
cheese.
fooled Gerard Butler's mom. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is, oh my goodness. I When I read that, I was like, "Okay, wait, did I read that right?" Like, you've met Gerard Butler and,
Mhm.
Helen Mirren? That is freaking amazing.
Yeah, Helen was fantastic, you know. So this was shortly after, I don't know, maybe a few years after she had won the Academy Award for the Queen, right, for playing the Queen. And so, I mean, thankfully, like I actually got her to autograph a copy of the Queen, you know, DVD for me, which is awesome. But just working with her, she was so just humble and down to earth. And I'm like, this is an Academy Award winner. You'd expect the ego to be out the door, but she was like, I told my wife, I'm like, if you didn't know who she was, you would just think she was like the coolest, like most down to earth, like youthful kind of grandma that you would ever met because she's just so loving and caring of other people. But I remember going and meeting with her at the house that she was renting in town for the movie in pre-production to help her with her accent. And and she asked me, she's like, would you like some tea? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. You know, I'm going to have tea with the Queen. And she's like, how'd you take it? I'm like, how does the Queen take it? You know, just kind of joking around. She's like, oh, with lots of sugar. I'm like, okay, let's do this. She actually had to
And a little bit of
learn.
corgi hair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She had to learn for the movie how the Queen takes her tea, and so she's sitting there with the sugar, one jar or five, you know. And anyway, so I had very sweet Queen's tea with Helen Mirren, and it was fantastic. Yeah,
It's amazing.
That's not something I bet a lot of people think about is these people who naturally have the very rich accents, but then we see them playing like American parts. I would never have considered that they needed coaches for that. Like you slipping in and out of things. I was just like, "Oh, they sound great. They sound amazing." I would have never guessed.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Is like I was humbled beyond. I'm like, holy smokes, this is an Academy Award winning actress. Like she's literally at the top of her game. I think I even slipped up and told her at one point. I'm like, Helen, listen, I just got to tell you, this is surreal. Like, I'm coaching you. It should be the other way around. She said, no, no, Steve, listen, you know, those of us who have gotten to the top of our game have gotten there because they realized when they need help and they ask for it. I'm like, oh my gosh. Again, just the humility, you know, to recognize that and to admit it. Like, yeah, I don't, you know, I'm not naturally like nobody's flawless. Everybody needs help in some area, and that's where she needed help was just to sound a little bit more American. But honestly, like she was good to start with, and I just kind of helped, you know, fine tune a little bit. Um, yeah, she's amazing. Love Helen.
Hey, I want to talk about like your networking and APAC and other
Yeah, yeah,
book cons. Do you go to a lot of book cons, and what do you envision when you, if you do, like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. So events. Okay. Um, you know, I mean, I think like all of us, I tend to be a little bit maybe selfish in which events I attend to, you know, choose to attend because I'm like, well, okay, I want to network. I want to network uh, wisely though, right? I want to meet the right people who not only who can just help me, but who I can help. So if I go to you know, an event, I want to meet someone who could cast me, you know, casting person, producer, somebody who could give me the work. But also lately, I've been thinking, well, yeah, but also authors. Hello, I can work directly with indie authors, and so I'm going to a book event later this year in Green Bay, Wisconsin, called Pack In the Readers, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm a Packers fan, grew up in
Packers fan.
Wisconsin, you know, so yeah, I'm excited about that. But I was like, okay, what do I do as a narrator at this event? I've never been to a book event, specifically a book event. I've gone to different conferences, like industry conferences, voiceover stuff, audiobook related type things. So I'm looking forward to it. Thankfully, I'm splitting a table with an author who I narrated a book for. So the two of us, we're already, you know, friends. We know each other. We're on good terms. Mostly, it's going to be all about her books and stuff. But you know, it's going to be like a collaboration of she's, oh, this is my narrator Steve. He narrated this book for me, and I'll have a little bit of stuff. People can scan, you know, code to go to my website and things like that. But um, mostly I'll just sit there, keep her company and entertained. And if anyone has questions about audiobooks, I'm there. But also, they're going to have panels and things like that where the readers who are attending can come learn about, like, oh, what does it actually take to make an audiobook, things like that. So I'm looking to network with authors to learn who is writing books that I'd be interested in narrating. How can I help you? Not only just, hey, I'll narrate your book, but also I'm glad to share the knowledge that I've gained over time of doing this. What does it look like? What can you expect as an author on your end? Does that answer your question?
Perfectly so.
Good.
Oh, Kathy.
Well done. Well done.
I think we have something we need to talk about later. All right. So if people want to hire you and they want to listen to your books, that sort of thing, where do they go to find you? How do they connect with you?
Well, I'm on the socials. Mostly I'm on Facebook because I'm old. My kids remind me. Instagram. I'm on TikTok a little bit here and there, um, until it goes away. But also you could just email me, Steve at coronaproductions.org, which is also my website, coronaproductions.com. You could just go there, coronaproductions.com. That's everything, though. That's my voiceover, my audiobook, and my coaching. If you want to go straight to my audiobook page, it's just coronaproductions.com/audiobooks. And you can hear my samples and reach out to me there.
Okay, well, I think we need to do a part 2 of this because I have 5 questions here I haven't got to answer. We haven't looked at the script
Let's do it.
but once or twice,
Welcome
and so
back.
we need to
Yeah,
do
I
this
agree.
again.
Sounds good. I'm glad to do it.
Awesome. Well, you were fantastic. This was such
So
a good
fun.
episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of L3. We can't wait to see you on the next one. You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality.